Good morning, friend. My name is Alwortia Hawthorne. I'm 69 years old, and I need to tell you about something that happened 3 months ago. Something that hurt me so badly. I still feel a punch in the gut when I think about it. My own son, David, the boy I raised with these hands, betrayed me in a way I never thought possible. But listen closely. This isn't a story of pity. It's one of dignity recovered. It was the 15th of March, late at night, you know. We were just one day away from our flight to Paris. A trip I'd planned for 2 months, spending $42,000. That was my entire pension, plus part of the inheritance my Rose left me. May she rest in peace. I had forgotten the passports at David's house in Brookhaven, where he lives with Vivian and my 2 grandchildren. I still had the keys he'd given me years ago. "For any emergency, Dad," he'd said. I never imagined the emergency would be discovering who my son really was. I walked in through the back door, the way I always did to avoid disturbing anyone. The house smelled like gumbo. Vivian must have been cooking. I heard voices in the kitchen and figured I'd wait in the living room. But then I heard those words, and they struck me like knives. That old man spent a fortune on this trip. I froze there in the hallway, the keys still dangling in my hand. David was talking to Vivian, and his voice had a tone I'd never heard him use with me, cold, calculating. "I've already figured out how to ditch the old man," he told his wife. "I'm going to tell him there's no room on the plane, that they oversold the seats. He'll swallow it whole. He always believes everything I tell him. We'll go alone, and he can stay home with his memories." Vivian laughed. It was a laugh that sounded like shattering glass in my ears. "And what if he finds out the truth?" she asked. "He won't find out," David replied, with that confidence I always believed came from him being my responsible son. I've been manipulating him my whole life. The important thing is he already spent the cash. The trip is paid for. Tell me, friend, are you listening? Have you ever felt the floor break beneath your feet? How the air gets thick and you can't breathe? Because that's what happened to me. Standing in that hall, listening to my son plot how to deceive me. My heart raced so fast I thought I'd have a heart attack right there. My hands were shaking. Sweat ran down my back. But it wasn't fear. It was worse. It was the death of 34 years of paternal love. "That jerk has been asking me for money for everything," David continued. "For the kids' tuition, the car broke down, Vivian needed to see the doctor. And me? I'm the idiot who keeps giving it all away. That's why we deserve this vacation," Vivian chimed in, "without the old relic hanging around, without his boring stories about when he had his travel agency. I left that house like a ghost friend, without making a sound, without the passports, without anything. I walked to my car, on shaky legs, and there, sitting in the driver's seat, I cried like I hadn't cried since I buried my Rose. Do you know what hurt the most? It wasn't the words, though every one felt like a thorn piercing me. It was realizing that everything had been a lie. Every hug, every "I love you, Dad." Every time David told me I was the best father in the world. I remembered all the times I'd pulled money from my savings to help him. $2,500 to fix his Honda Civic when the engine failed. $1,800 for Vivian's doctor's appointment, $3,200 for the kids' private school tuition. Every time he would tell me, "Dad, you're my salvation." Every time he'd hug me after I handed over the money. And I, the fool he thought I was, always believed him. I sold my gold wedding watch to give him money when he was out of work last year. I ate cornbread and collard greens for weeks to save every dollar so I could help him. My Rose would have died of shame if she had known how our son was using me. I drove back to my house in the old Fourth Ward, that big, empty house on Peachtree Street, where Rose and I were happy for 40 years. I poured myself a Woodford Reserve, a good one, and sat in the armchair where my wife used to knit while I read the newspaper. Do you know that feeling, my friend? When something you thought was solid as rock crumbles in your hands? That was my relationship with David. 34 years, building something that turned out to be a beautiful lie. But there, sipping my bourbon, I realized something else. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was realizing I had allowed them to see me that way, as an ATM with money, not as a father. David was right about one thing. I always believed everything he told me. When he told me he needed money for Vivian's medical expenses, I never asked why he didn't use his company insurance. When he said the kids needed new uniforms, I never asked what they really cost. I just opened my wallet like an ATM with legs. That night, sitting in the darkness of my house, I understood that I was just as guilty as he was. I had raised a manipulator by giving him everything without question. I had confused love with being an eternal provider. But I also understood something more important, something that would change everything. I still had time to teach my son who Elijah Hawthorne really was. Not the ATM with money, not the grandpa who lets himself be used, but a man with dignity. Listen to this, brother. There are blows that knock you down immediately, and there are blows that kill you slowly, like poison. David's words were the latter. But sometimes that poison can turn into medicine if you know how to use it. That morning, March 16th, as I planned what I was going to do, I remembered something my father told me when I was young. My son, respect is not begged for, it is earned, and it is defended. I had forgotten that lesson for too many years. It was time to remind my son that his dad wasn't some pushover. It was time for Aaliyah Hawthorne to reclaim his dignity. I got to my house on Peachtree Street near midnight, friend. That large house I bought during the best years of my agency, Hawthorne Travels, when Rose and I dreamed of filling every room with the sound of grandchildren's laughter. Now it feels so empty that my footsteps sound like drums at a funeral. I sat down at the same cedar wood desk where my Rose kept the family accounts for 40 years. It still has the pencil marks, you know, little scratches where she noted the monthly expenses, always worried that the money would stretch to cover everything. Elijah, she used to tell me, every dime counts. If she could see me now, throwing away thousands on a son who saw me as an ATM. I took out all the trip documents and spread them on the table like poker cards. $42,000, brother. Every piece of paper, every receipt, every reservation represented a little piece of my dreams and my entire retirement savings. There were the vouchers for the Four Seasons George V in Paris, $1,600 a night, the Air France business class tickets, the reservations for Le Jules Verne dinner at the Eiffel Tower. I tell you, I planned every detail of that trip, thinking about my grandchildren's faces. Maya, 8 years old, who always asks why the castles in the movies are so beautiful. Caleb, 5 years old, who collects toy cars and wanted to see the Ferraris in Italy. I imagined their little eyes shining when they saw the Louvre, when they climbed the Eiffel Tower, when they tasted real Italian gelato in Rome. I remembered the day I went to the travel agency downtown. The young guy who helped me, a kid not much older than David, looked at me strangely when I told him what I wanted. "Mr. Hawthorne," he said, "this is a very expensive vacation for a retiree. Are you sure?" I replied with my chest swollen with pride. "Young man, my whole life I took strangers to beautiful places. Now I want to show Europe to my grandchildren before this old man dies." The young man smiled then and treated me like the king I thought I was. He showed me the best options, got me discounts for being in the travel industry, and put together a perfect itinerary. 3 weeks touring Paris, Rome, Barcelona, private guides in every city, Michelin-starred restaurants, 5-star hotels. Every night for 2 months, I studied those brochures as if they were the Bible. I tapped Rose's picture by the Arc de Triomphe. "Look, old girl, this is where our grandkids will walk." I showed her the photos of the Colosseum. Imagine Caleb running where the gladiators ran. But that night, sitting with all those pictures, I also remembered everything I had sacrificed to put that money together. Tell me, friend, have you lived on nothing but rice and beans for 3 months to save every dollar? Because I have. When David asked me for $3,200 for the kids' tuition in January, I sold my navy blue suit, the only good one I had left, to a pawn shop downtown. They gave me next to nothing, but it didn't matter. My son needed me. No. When Vivian got sick in February, and they needed $1,800 for the private doctor, I stopped buying meat for 6 weeks. Pure vegetables and soup bones for broth. My neighbors thought I was ill because I got so thin. But my daughter-in-law needed medical care, didn't she? My car broke down in December. The transmission was completely shot. The mechanic asked for $1,500 to fix it. I decided to walk 2 hours daily to get downtown instead of spending that money. "It's for Europe," I told myself as I dragged my feet across the hot pavement. For months, I ate 1 meal a day. Brother, 1 meal. In the morning, I had coffee with toast, and at night, I made my little rice and beans. On Sundays, if I was lucky, I bought a rotisserie chicken from the local market. But every dollar I saved was one step closer to seeing happiness in my grandchildren's eyes. Do you know what kept me going through those sacrifices? The image of David hugging me after the trip. "Thank you, Dad, for giving us the most beautiful experience of our lives." That's what I imagined he would say. "You're the best granddad in the world." But there, with those papers in my hands, I understood the truth. David never planned for me to be part of that beautiful experience. I was just the sponsor who paid for everything. I also remembered the day I took Rose's inheritance out of the bank, $7,500 that my wife had saved by selling homemade pies outside the church door for 15 years. "This is for emergencies, Elijah," she had told me before she died. "For when we really need it, an emergency." Giving my family the trip of their dreams seemed like the best emergency possible. Rose would have understood, I thought. She adored those grandkids, too. But that morning, as my tears fell onto those expensive vouchers, I wondered what my Rose would have really thought. She, who knew David better than anyone. She once told me, "Elijah, that boy has shark eyes when he talks about money." I scolded her then. "Don't say that about our son, Rose." But now, 3 years after her death, her words resonated like church bells in my ears. By 2 o'clock in the morning, I knew exactly what I was going to do. If David thought his dad was just an ATM, I was going to teach him what ATMs are capable of when they reclaim their dignity. I took out my old notebook, the one where I kept hotel contacts when I had my agency. Peter Morris, my partner from 20 years ago, now worked for an international operator. Carla Reed, who used to be my secretary, had connections at all the airlines. Robert Silver knew people in every hotel in Europe. I started making a list of calls one by one, like a general planning a battle. But this wasn't a battle against external enemies. It was a battle to reclaim my self-respect. Do you know what I thought while writing those names, my friend? That sometimes children teach you lessons you didn't want to learn. David was teaching me that I had confused being generous with being a fool, that I had confused loving with being a cash machine. But he was also giving me the chance to remember who the hell Elijah Hawthorne was before he became the grandfather who gave everything without asking for anything in return. At 3 o'clock in the morning, with my coffee cold and the contact list complete, I understood a simple but profound truth. Dignity cannot be bought, brother, but it can be recovered. And I was about to recover mine, even if it cost me $42,000 to do it. The plan was ready. All that was left was to execute it before my son arrived with his rehearsed lies about non-existent plane seats. By 5 o'clock in the morning, I was already awake, friend. I hadn't slept all night. I got up, put on my white shirt, the same one I used for important agency meetings, and made a strong cup of coffee. I needed a clear mind for what was coming. The first call was to Peter Morris, my friend of 30 years, who had been my partner when Hawthorne Travels was the most respected agency in Atlanta. He now worked with Global Travel Partners, a company that handles reservations all over Europe. "Peter," I said when he answered, "I need a huge favor. I have to cancel some European reservations, all of them, today." Peter was silent for a moment. He knew my voice well enough to know something serious was happening. "Are you okay, friend? Is something wrong with your health?" "I'm better than ever, Peter. I just need you to help me cancel everything. I'll send you the confirmation numbers by text." "Give me 5 minutes to get to the office," he said, without asking any more questions. That was Peter, a man who understood that when a true friend calls you at 5 o'clock in the morning, it's not the time to ask for details. While I waited, I prepared all the documentation, every voucher, every confirmation number, every payment reference. I put them in chronological order, just like when I organized my clients' files, because this was also work, brother, the most important work of my life, reclaiming my dignity. Peter called me back at 6:15. "All set, friend. Send me everything. I have direct contacts at Air France, the Four Seasons, everywhere. But I warn you, the penalties are going to be big." "I don't care," I said. "Do it." The first cancellation was the Four Seasons George V in Paris. $1,600 per night. 7 nights. The nicest family suite they had. When Peter confirmed the cancellation, it felt like a piece of my heart was ripped out. I had dreamed so much of seeing my grandchildren, having breakfast in that elegant dining room, with white tablecloths and a view of the Champs-Élysées. Then came the Air France flights, business class for 5 people. David, Vivian, the kids, and me. $7,500 in airfare alone. "Confirmed, friend," Peter said. "But keep in mind that canceling with less than 24 hours notice, they're going to charge you 50%. "Let them charge whatever they want," I replied. Every dollar of penalty was worth it if it helped me teach my son who his father really was. The excursions followed. The private tour of the Louvre with a guide, $750. The dinner at Le Jules Verne in the Eiffel Tower, $950 for the table with the best view. The boat ride on the Seine at sunset, $500. Each cancellation physically hurt me, as if needles were being stuck in my chest. But I also felt something strange, something I hadn't felt in years: control. For the first time in decades, I was making the decisions. I wasn't reacting to David's needs. I wasn't rushing to solve his problems with money. It was me moving the pieces on the board. Carla Reed, my former secretary, helped me with the reservations in Italy and Spain. "Mr. Hawthorne," she said when I called her, "are you sure? These hotels are very difficult to get, and the dates you have are high season." "I'm completely sure, Carla. Cancel everything." Robert Silver took care of the transfers and activities in Barcelona, tours to the Sagrada Familia, tickets to the Camp Nou to see Barcelona play, an excursion to Montserrat. "Boss," Robert said. He still called me that 20 years after I sold the agency. "This is not like you. You've always been the most careful with your family's trips." "Precisely why I'm doing it, Robert," I answered. By 8 o'clock in the morning, everything was canceled. $19,000 converted into air, into crossed-out numbers on European computers. But for the first time in months, I felt light, as if a load I hadn't known I was carrying had been lifted from my shoulders. I took a shower, put on my navy blue dress pants and my nicest white shirt. I carefully combed my hair and put on a little of the polo cologne that Rose gave me for our last anniversary. If I was going to receive my son for his big performance, I wanted to look like the respectable man I was, not the grandfather he imagined. I put on some music, classic blues from the 60s, the kind I liked when I was young and had dreams of my own. I brewed chicory coffee, the way my mother taught me, with a cinnamon. The aroma filled the house, and for a moment I felt like the old Elijah, the one who built a successful business, the one who fell in love with the most beautiful woman in the neighborhood, the one who had plans beyond pleasing an ungrateful son. At 9 o'clock sharp, I heard the noise of David's Honda Civic pull up. The same Civic I had paid to repair 3 times. I peeked through the window and watched them get out. David, with his actor's face, preparing for his role. Vivian fixing her hair as if she were going to a photo shoot. And my grandchildren. Oh, my grandchildren. Maya was wearing her pink dress, the one I bought for her birthday, and a little backpack with a doll inside. Caleb was carrying his blue wheeled suitcase, excited, hopping from one foot to the other. Both of them were radiant with happiness, talking about everything they were going to see in Europe. That's what hurt the most, my friend. It wasn't just that David had betrayed me. It was that he was using the excitement of those innocent children to do it. They truly believed they were going to travel with their granddad, that we would be a happy family, seeing the world together. I opened the door before they could knock. "Good morning, family," I said with the most genuine smile I could manage. "Granddad," the children shouted, clinging to my legs. "We want to go to the plane now. Are your bags ready?" "Of course, my loves," I said, hugging them. "Granddad is always ready for adventures." David cleared his throat. It was his moment, his great performance. He put on a look of concern that would have won an award on primetime TV. "Dad, I have bad news." "Oh, really?" I said, looking him directly in the eyes. "Tell me, son." "I just spoke with the airline. There's a problem with the reservations." He paused dramatically, as if it pained him to say it. "There's no room for you on the flight, Dad. They made a mistake with the number of seats. They're oversold." I maintained my smile. "Seriously? What terrible luck, right?" "Yes, Dad, it's awful. But don't worry. We're going as planned. And we got you a ticket on the next flight. We'll meet you in Paris in 2 days. Maximum. Vivian put on her sad soap opera face. Mr. Hawthorne, we're so sad for you. But you know how airlines are. There's nothing you can do. I searched my son's eyes for a sign. A quiver in his voice. An evasive look. A little remorse. Anything that would tell me he knew he was betraying me inside. But there was nothing. His eyes were cold, calculating, certain that the old man would swallow the story whole. Well, these things happen, I said calmly. The important thing is that you all enjoy the trip. The children looked sad. But Granddad, we wanted you to come with us, Maya said with that little voice that always melted my heart. Don't worry, my darlings. Granddad wants you to see all those beautiful places. You're going to see the Eiffel Tower. You'll see famous paintings. You'll eat Italian ice cream. I hugged them tightly, breathing in their children's shampoo scent, engraving that moment, because I didn't know when I would have them this close again. Are you going to miss us, Granddaddy? Caleb asked. I'm going to miss you so much it's going to hurt right here, I said, touching my chest. But you're going to have so much fun. And when you get back, you're going to tell me all about it, right? David was already impatient. He had finished his act and wanted to leave before anything went wrong. Well, Dad, we have to go now. The flight leaves at 2 o'clock, and we still have to check in. Of course, I said. Don't let the old man make you late. I walked them out to the car. David put the suitcases in the trunk. 5 big suitcases for 3 weeks of travel. Vivian got into the passenger seat, checking her makeup in the mirror. The children waved goodbye from the back windows, their little hands pressed against the glass. Take care, I yelled as David started the engine. And take lots of pictures. We love you, Granddad, the children shouted. David lowered the window. Dad, don't worry about anything. In 2 days, we'll get your flight, and we'll catch up with you there. Everything is going to be perfect. I'm sure it will, son, I replied. I'm completely sure. I watched them drive away down Peachtree Street. The Civic disappeared behind the corner where the store is, carrying my family toward the Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, toward a trip they would never be able to enjoy. I returned to my house, closed the door slowly, and there, standing in my empty living room, I laughed. I laughed like I hadn't laughed in years. A clean, liberating laugh, like when you're a kid and you play a trick on someone who deserves it. Because that's when I completely understood what had just happened, my friend. I hadn't just canceled a trip. I had canceled 34 years of being a fool who let himself be used by his own son. And for the first time in a long time, I felt proud to be Elijah Hawthorne. The rest of March 16th passed in a strange way. Friend, for the first time in months, I didn't feel that anxiety in my chest, that constant worry about whether everything would go well on the trip. I sat in my favorite armchair, the brown leather one Rose gave me for our 25th wedding anniversary, and I read the entire newspaper for the first time in ages. How funny. Before, I always read the news while thinking about other things, whether David would need money for something, whether the grandchildren were doing well in school, the looming trip expenses. But that day, I read every article calmly, as if I had all the time in the world. Because I did, brother. I had recovered my time by recovering my dignity. Around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I got hungry. I hadn't eaten breakfast because of the morning's nerves, so I went to the kitchen and prepared something simple: scrambled eggs with turkey bacon, refried beans from the day before, warm cornbread, and chicory coffee. Poor man's food, you might say, but food made with love for myself. Do you know what I thought while I was eating, my friend? that I hadn't enjoyed a meal like that in months. I was always worried about saving for the trip, about not spending too much, about saving every dollar to give my grandchildren the perfect experience. But that day, every bite tasted like freedom. After eating, I remembered Ray Connolly, my lifelong friend. We had worked together in the 70s when I was just starting the travel agency, and he had a small trucking company. We became friends hauling tourists to Florida every weekend. But since Rose died, I had distanced myself from all my friends. I was ashamed for them to see me so lonely, so lost. I looked up his number in my old notebook. Ray was already 72, 3 years older than me, but he had always been a strong man, the kind who never gives up. I dialed the number, a little nervous. We hadn't spoken in almost 2 years. "Hello?" He answered with that raspy voice he got after smoking for 40 years. "Ray, it's Elijah. Elijah Hawthorne." He was quiet for a moment. Then it sounded like he was smiling. "Elijah, you rascal. Where have you been hiding? My wife, Hope, asks about you every week. She says you're more lost than a blind man on Mother's Day." I laughed. That was Ray, always with sayings that made you feel at home. "I've been around, friend, battling life. How are you, brother? I haven't heard from you in ages. After Hope's funeral, you completely disappeared." I told him a little about what had happened in recent months. Not everything, of course. The wound was still too fresh, but I told him I'd been very focused on the grandchildren, trying to be the best granddad possible. "Elijah," Ray said to me, with that wisdom that comes with age. "Grandkids practically raise themselves. What they need from us isn't expensive things, but time and affection. You know that already." His words hit me hard. "How about we meet tomorrow, friend? I'd like to talk to you." "Of course, brother. Come to my place around 10. Hope will be happy to see you. She'll make you some of those country biscuits and gravy you like." I hung up the phone, feeling better than I had in months. I had forgotten what it felt like to have real friends. People who love you without expecting anything in return. People who don't see you as an ATM with legs. I spent the rest of the afternoon organizing old agency papers I had stored in the closet. I found photos of the trips I organized over 30 years, thank you letters from satisfied clients, newspaper articles from when I received the Chamber of Tourism recognition in 1995. Do you know what I realized, reviewing those things? That I had been someone important once. Elijah Hawthorne hadn't always been the grandfather who let himself be manipulated by his son. He had been a respected businessman, a man who built something with his own hands, someone who had his own plans and dreams. Around 8 o'clock at night, I prepared a light dinner, a grilled cheese sandwich and a glass of milk, and sat down to watch the news. The anchor was talking about the weather in Europe. In Paris, clear skies and a pleasant temperature of 72 degrees Fahrenheit, he said. Perfect for tourists visiting the City of Light. I imagined David and his family arriving at Charles de Gaulle Airport at that moment. They had probably already passed immigration, collected their bags, and were looking for the transfer that was never going to arrive. I won't lie to you, friend. A part of me felt bad for the grandkids. They weren't to blame for having a manipulative father. But another part of me, the part that had been holding anger for years, felt satisfied. Finally, there were going to be consequences for David's actions. I went to bed early, around 9:30. I put on the late-night news on the bedroom TV, the one Rose and I always watched before sleeping. For the first time in months, I didn't take the sleeping pill the doctor had prescribed. I didn't need it. My conscience was clear. Just as I was falling asleep, the phone rang. The clock on the nightstand read 10:30 at night. Strange numbers on the screen. International code. Code for France. I answered, knowing perfectly well who it was and what he was going to say. "Dad? Dad, please answer." David's voice sounded desperate, very different from the confidence he had shown that morning. Bang. In the background, I could hear whoosh, airport noises, announcements in French, people talking, luggage carts. "Hello, David," I said, with all the calm in the world. "How was the flight?" "Dad, there's a huge problem. We're at Charles de Gaulle Airport, but the transfer, we called the hotel, and they told us our reservation is canceled." "What is going on?" I could hear Vivian crying in the background, speaking her high school French to someone who obviously didn't understand her. I could also hear my grandchildren's voices. Maya asking why they couldn't go to the hotel. Caleb crying because he was hungry. That did hurt, I won't lie, but I also understood it was part of the price of the lesson. "Dad, we've spent all the money we brought. We can't go to any museums. We can't climb the Eiffel Tower. We can't do any of the things we planned. The kids are just crying and asking for you." "David," I said, with all the calm in the world, "do you remember what you told Vivian? That you'd been manipulating me your whole life? If that's true, then you're smart enough to solve this problem on your own." "Dad, please. We need money to get back to Atlanta. The return tickets cost about $5,000 per person. We don't even have enough to eat tomorrow, much less to get home." "Son, I needed things too. For many years. I needed a son who loved me for real, not for my money. But I learned to live without having it. You're going to learn, too." I hung up the phone, turned it off completely, and put it in the nightstand drawer. Then I lay in the darkness, listening to the silence of my house, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Peace, my friend. For the first time in a long time, I had peace in my heart. The morning of March 17th, I woke up different, friend. For the first time in months, I didn't feel that lump in my chest, that anxiety that had accompanied me since I started planning the European trip. I got up slowly, without haste, and noticed something strange. I had slept all night without waking up once. I hadn't remembered resting this deeply since Rose died. I prepared my chicory coffee as usual, but this time I added more cinnamon, more sweetener. Why not? I no longer had to save every dollar to please an ungrateful son. I had a breakfast of biscuits and gravy with scrambled eggs, the good kind of ham that I used to only buy for special occasions. And for the first time in months, every bite tasted like what it was: food made with love for myself. Around 9 o'clock in the morning, I called Global Travel Partners to inquire about the refund. The young woman who answered, named Patricia, explained everything with great patience. "Mr. Hawthorne, last-minute cancellations do have penalties, but since you have so many years in the travel industry, we're going to do our best to recover the largest amount." In the end, after speaking with supervisors and managers, they confirmed that I would receive $29,500 per kilo. $12,500 was being kept in fines and penalties. But honestly, friend, $12,500 had never seemed so well spent. It was the price of my recovered dignity. Then I called Ray Connolly. "Friend, are we still on for today?" "Of course, Elijah. Hope is already excited. She says she's making fried chicken to celebrate your return from the land of the disappeared." I arrived at his house in the West End around 10:30. Ray lived in a simple but very well-kept little house, with his small flower garden that Hope tended every day. When she saw me arrive, my friend's wife hugged me as if I were her own brother. "Elijah, it's about time," she said, as she squeezed me against her generous chest. "Since Rose passed, you've been walking around like a lost soul. Sit down here, son. I'm going to serve you some country biscuits and gravy that will bring back your will to live." Ray and I sat in his backyard under the shade of a pecan tree he had planted when he married Hope 40 years ago. The air smelled of jasmine and fresh coffee. For a moment, I felt like I had returned home after a very long journey. "How are you really, brother?" Ray asked me, lighting a cigarette. He knew Hope didn't let him smoke inside the house. And there, sitting under that pecan tree, I told him the whole story, from the beginning, from the months of saving for the trip, David's lies about the money he needed, the conversation I overheard in his kitchen, everything. I held nothing back, friend. It was like confessing to a priest, but better, because Ray had known me since we were young, and he loved me. My friend listened without interrupting even once. He just nodded his head, smoked his cigarette, and occasionally put his hand on my shoulder when he noticed a part of the story was difficult for me to tell. When I finished, Ray was silent for a long time. Then he crushed his cigarette in the clay ashtray and looked me straight in the eyes. "Elijah, I always knew you were a man of honor. Since I met you nearly 50 years ago, you've always been straight as an arrow. But what you just did isn't just about honor. It's a lesson for every father in this country." His words reached my soul, brother, because coming from Ray, who had raised 4 children and already had 12 grandchildren, they meant a lot. "You know what happens, friend," he continued. "American parents have a curse. We believe that loving our children means giving them everything they ask for. We turn them into eternal children who never learn to value anything." Hope came out of the kitchen with a tray full of biscuits and gravy, refried beans, freshly made cornbread, and chicory coffee. "What are you two talking about so seriously?" she asked as she served us. "About how Elijah taught his son some manners," Ray told her with a smile. My friend's wife sat with us and also heard part of the story. When I finished, she crossed herself and said, "Oh, Elijah, I'm so glad you finally opened your eyes. That David always gave me bad vibes. Even as a child, he had the look of a spoiled brat." After breakfast, Ray told me something that changed my plans for the rest of my life. "Elijah, a group of us, all retired folks, are organizing a trip to the Amazon rainforest in July. Nothing luxurious, no 5-star hotels, but a beautiful trip, in good company, to see those ruins we always wanted to see. Are you in? Tell me, friend, do you have dreams you've been putting off for 30 years? Because I did. Since I was young and watched documentaries on television, I always wanted to see the Amazon. But first, I had to build my business, then raise David, then take care of Rose in her final years, then look after the grandchildren. I'm in, I said, without a second thought. How much does it cost? And when do we leave? It's about $5,000 per person, all inclusive. Plane tickets, simple, but clean lodges, all meals, and a guide who speaks English. We leave July 15th and return July 30th. For the first time in years, I was planning something for me. Not for David, not for the grandkids, not to look good to anyone, just for Elijah Hawthorne and his postponed dreams. The following days were strange but beautiful. Brother, I didn't have that constant rush I'd had for months. I wasn't thinking about whether David would need money for something. I wasn't worried about trip expenses. I wasn't constantly checking the clock. I started doing things I had forgotten I enjoyed. I went back to reading novels. I bought Invisible Man that I'd never finished.
I enrolled in a beginner's French course at Fulton County Community College at 69 years old. It's never too late to learn something new, the professor told me when I explained my age. I also started doing volunteer work at St. Vincent's Senior Center, delivering supplies to the elderly who have no family. Do you know what I discovered there? That there are fates worse than having an ungrateful son. There are old people who don't have a son at all, grateful or ungrateful. 1 week after the Paris disaster, David called me from France. His voice sounded desperate, very different from the confident David I knew. Dad, please, listen to me. We're living in a horrible hostel near the metro station. It's about $55 a night for a tiny room where all 5 of us are packed in tight. Vivian got a stomach bug from the cheap food we're buying on the street. I could hear my grandchildren crying in the background. Maya asking when they were going home. Caleb saying he was hungry. That did hurt. I won't lie. But I also understood it was part of the price of the lesson. Dad, we've spent all the money we brought. We can't go to any museums. We can't climb the Eiffel Tower. We can't do any of the things we planned. The kids just cry and ask for you. David, I said, with all the calm in the world, do you remember what you told Vivian? That you'd been manipulating me your whole life? If that's true, then you're smart enough to solve this problem on your own. Dad, please, we need money to get back to Atlanta. The return tickets cost about $4,000 for the whole family. We don't even have enough to eat tomorrow, much less to get home. Son, I needed things too, for many years. I needed a son who loved me for real, not for my money. But I learned to live without having it. You're going to learn too. I hung up the phone and didn't answer his calls for 2 weeks. Later, I found out from the neighbors that Vivian had called her parents in tears, asking to borrow money to get back. Her in-laws had to sell a piece of land they owned to send them the money for the return trip. When they finally returned to Atlanta, David didn't look for me right away. I suppose he needed time to process what had happened, to understand that he no longer had the same ATM for a father. 1 month later, on a Saturday afternoon, he came to my house alone, without Vivian, without the children. He knocked on the door softly, as if he wasn't sure he wanted me to open it. When I saw him standing there, my heart sank. He looked beaten, friend, thin, dark circles under his eyes, his clothes wrinkled. But above all, he looked ashamed, like a child who knows he has done something terribly wrong. Hi, Dad, he said, almost whispering. Hi, David. Come in. He sat down on the armchair, where he always sat when he came to visit. But this time, he looked small, shrunken. He wasn't the confident David who had come to deceive me about the plane. Dad, I came to ask for your forgiveness, he said. And his voice broke, like when he was a child and had done some mischief. He started crying there in my living room, crying like an adult man who realizes he made a colossal mistake, who lost something he'll never be able to get back. David, I said, sitting across from him, don't come to ask for my forgiveness. Ask for forgiveness from the Elijah Hawthorne you killed with your lies, the father who believed he had a good son. Dad, I do love you. I really do. I don't know what happened to me when I saw you had money and I was struggling with expenses. I got angry, like I thought you owed me help. You know what, son? I said, looking him straight in the eyes. I'm not angry with you. On the contrary, I'm grateful. You did me a huge favor, David. You showed me what I had become. An ATM with legs, a man without self-dignity. But you also gave me the opportunity to remember who I really am.
I told him about my trip to the Amazon, the French classes, the work at the senior center. For the first time in years, I'm making plans for Elijah Hawthorne, not to be the perfect granddad or the father who gives everything. David listened to everything without saying a word. In the end, he asked, "Is there any way to fix this, Dad? To be a family again?" "Son, real family isn't based on lies and manipulation. If you want to be my son again, you'll have to start from scratch, like an adult man who relates to another adult man with respect and honesty." He left that afternoon without promising me anything, but also without asking me for anything. It was a start. Listen closely, friend, who has accompanied me through this story. Sometimes the people who love us most are the ones who can hurt us the most because they know exactly where to touch for it to sting. But they can also be the ones who teach us the most about ourselves. David taught me that I had confused love with being an eternal provider. He taught me that being generous doesn't mean being a fool. He taught me that dignity isn't something others give you. It's something you decide to keep or give away. Now, when I wake up every morning in my house on Peachtree Street, I no longer feel that anxiety about what David might need today. I feel a desire to live my own life, to fulfill my own dreams, to be Elijah Hawthorne before being anyone's dad. In 3 weeks, I'm going to the Amazon with Ray and 6 other retired companions. We're going to see those historical places I always wanted to see. We're going to walk the same trails the indigenous tribes walked. We're going to feel alive and free like I haven't felt in years. And if David learns his lesson, if he understands what respect and honesty mean, maybe one day we can be father and son again. But this time on solid foundations, not on beautiful lies. Because in the end, my brother, dignity is not negotiable. You either have it or you don't. And I just got mine back. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.